Hello, my name is Matt. Welcome to another episode of Unbearable 73. In this episode, I'm talking about a TV show I really enjoyed. It's a heavy spoiler review of The Rig. So, that begs the question, what is The Rig? Now, let me first say that I provided TVDB, IMDB, and Wikipedia links below to this so you can read up all about it, The Rig is a TV show whose first and possibly only season runs for 6 episodes. I'm unsure if the bleak ending is supposed to be a horror cliffhanger or the showrunners intend for it to be ongoing. So like it ends on a bleak note so you don't know how sometimes it happens with stuff like that. Like in Stephen King's The Mist, the novel, right? That's how it ended, on a sort of open bleak note, whereas the movie inverted that. It was created by David McPherson for Amazon Prime Video. It is the first Amazon Prime TV show filmed entirely in Scotland. This should be interpreted as it was a Scottish TV show that eventually got Amazon to partially fund it, and thus they can now call it an Amazon Prime original. It is actually better than almost any Amazon Prime original other than Reacher and the Terminalists that I've seen in the past couple of years. So, The Rig is about a crew of an oil rig in the North Sea who encounter a mysterious substance coming up from their primary well. The show is a character-based horror show. And what that means is that the horror element is what the characters experience. In other words, it's not about jump scares or about gore fests or whatever. It's the experience of the characters in a horrible situation that convey the horror aspect. So that's about as far as I can go without spoiling anything. So this is your last warning. So I will say up front, it's a 10 out of 10 to me. Maybe a 9.5 out of 10. It's this is one of the things where, definitely 9 out of 10, almost 10 out of 10. And every time I think about it, sometimes I get a higher opinion. Then I think about a little flaw here and there, but it's almost perfect. Okay. So let's talk about the production first. The visuals. Now, normally I don't like a washed out color palette. Like if you look here, I have some slides. I'll whiz through them. You see how I'm showing you some shots, and it's kind of a little washed out looking. Like there's no really bright colors, even though that this guy should have a bright orange jacket. It looks faded out. This guy's jacket should be bright red, but we know this should be bright because on an oil rig, this is designed to be seen very clearly, right? But so normally I would dislike that faded out palette, right? But I think it fits the tone and it's not abused here. Now you want a movie where it was abused, go watch Man of Steel, as an example. And I think the palette, the washed out color palette, adds a level of bleakness that really works to temper the hope that rises when the crew tries to do things. And it's important to note that The Rig is an apocalyptic setting, and you really can only go one or two ways with that: bleak or bold. They go with bleak in this show. Right? The presentation in visual terms is also well done. The background special effects don't detract from what the characters are doing. In terms of direction, John Strickland, who directed most of it, does a masterful job. There are a couple of flaws. Some secondary characters really get a bit too much screen time, or their subplots are not tied in well enough to the main plots for them to matter, and therefore you don't really care about them. But other than that, he doesn't overuse special effects, and there are a lot of practical effects. You make me wonder if they filmed on an actual oil rig. The actors, both the major and minor ones, did a great job. All the characters were played well by their actors, even the ones whose material, the couple minor ones, as I mentioned, whose material might not have been so great. Now, it's important to note, pretty much every character has normal human character flaws, and none of them are unbelievable in that regard, okay? I want to go over 3 of the more significant ones whose stories intrigued me, okay? So first up, picture here, that's Ian Glenn, who plays Magnus Macmillan. I know I'm not showing a great picture of him there, but he does. I think this picture characters the tone of his character for the entirety of the show. He's a very conflicted character in a sort of murky mental, emotional place. Okay, he plays Magnus Macmillan. He's the leader and manager of the rig. Now he's most famous as an actor playing Jorah Mormont on Game of Thrones. So, you know, not all the characters on the show go through a full emotional journey, but McMillan does. If you want a comparison, his journey psychologically is very similar to the one of Bryan Cranston's character, Dr. Ford, went through in Godzilla 2014. He had to choose between duty and family, loss of life on either side, and he lost his wife as a result. That was what happened in Godzilla 2014. Whereas Bryan Cranston's character lost his son, if I remember that correctly. Now, the important thing to note is that the journey McMillan goes on makes his character the emotional center of the show. Now, I'm going to say the second most important character on the show is Lars Hutton, who is the crew chief for the workers on the rig, who is dead center here. This guy. He was also played by another Game of Thrones actor, Owen Teale, who played Alistair Thorne. This character is in perpetual stewing anger. It's simmering. And maybe it's because Owen Teale plays those characters very well. Okay, he represents the working man who sees his job being threatened by changes for most of the season. He's the counterpart to McMillan being a meaning that Hutton is a disruptive force until the end when he becomes part of a constructive force. The image of Lars sitting dead center in a crew meeting on the rig, simmering with anger on his face. This is from episode 1, and that pretty much summarizes the opening nature of his character. And last up, we have Emily Hampshire as Rose Mason, and this is your explainer character who engaged in the exposition needed to let the audience know stuff. With characters like this, it's very easy to use them for info dumps and nothing else. But they managed to make Rose likable, giving her just enough of a sense of being annoying, but more as a deliberate character flaw rather than a characteristic of bad writing. Now, I could spend this entire review talking about all the characters in this show. They're all well written, and while there are one or two flaws for most of them here or there in terms of writing, overall the show is a great character-driven event. I've highlighted these three characters specifically because at least one of them shows up in every single plot or subplot. Okay? Now, next on the writing, in terms of that, I'm not talking about the plot, but the mechanics, how well it's constructed and plotted, how well it's constructed, so to speak. Every single plot or subplot that is not left as a cliffhanger is resolved in the season, which is great. And note that the resolutions of several are pretty grim. This show, if it's renewed, could either be a post-apocalyptic survival series or some sort of scientific mystery show. It all depends on how the scale of the extinction level event at the end of the season affects the Earth. Soundtrack was okay, nothing outstanding, nothing bad. Special effects, for a TV show that they had to depict something that required special effects on a massive scale, this did it pretty well. I watched it in 1080p. I wonder if I watched it in 4K, if they actually would I notice some breakdown in the special effects? Because, did they go to the effort of putting in good high-resolution work? So on the plot, let's just the specifics of what's going on here, okay? I'll reiterate, it's full spoilers, which you already heard the ending of it, so it's, the overall plot of the show is fairly straightforward. The crew of an oil rig in the North Sea is suddenly isolated as a mysterious fog rolls in and communication get cut off with the mainland. Stranger and stranger things begin happening, and we see some sort of force or entity begin to either guide or control some of the humans. This entity on the show comes to be called the Ancestor. A company representative arrives from another rig which was destroyed. We see that. He's trying to implement some for this character for another land. He's trying to implement some sort of plan which he thinks will kill the Ancestor. Now, Rose Mason eventually determines that an ancient underground entity, perhaps the oldest life form on Earth, who seems to date events in terms of mass extinctions, is the motivator. Slowly, a ring deep on the ocean floor is being formed, a sixth ring, which seems to be counting down to another extinction-level event. It turns out that this entity or force is sapient and begins to co-opt members of the crew. In this first season, we are not 100% sure what the entity is having them do. At first, I thought this was tied into the subplot where they were trying to communicate with the Ancestor, but this thread did not merge cleanly into the communications thread, which was being driven by Rose. Later, an executive from Pictor, the oil company that runs the rig, arrived, as I mentioned before, and begins a main plotline who wants to do something with the rig he thinks will kill the Ancestor off. He appears to think that the Ancestor is a local phenomenon to that oil field, not a worldwide one. He initiates a subplot exploiting Teal's suspicions and combative nature in an attempt to take over the rig from McMillan. All these plots converge as the answer seemingly reaches another worldwide extinction level event, as our human characteristics plots all switch from preventing that in some capacity to surviving it. So that's your plot summary, right? Now, mentioned briefly, when I refer to worldwide extinction events, there have been 5 of those events known, proven events, right? And this show indicates that a 6th one is happening. There is a mystery: is the ancestor causing it, or is they working with humans to try to prevent it? We won't find out until next season, I guess. Right. So, first on the plot. If you read or watched enough apocalyptic fiction, there's nothing new in the show's plot or subplots so far. Perhaps the most famous example would Dean Koontz's Phantoms, which involve a similar, if smaller scale entity that would come up out of the ground and just cause extinctions, basically. So the question of originality is not what we should be judging the rig on, but rather implementation. The rig hits all the necessary points for this sort of story. The entity is powerful enough to be sort of inevitable, but still to some extent survivable. The story isn't just a gore fest of killing for the sake of entertainment. They don't just info dump out of context, to non-contextual character exposition. Most annoying thing ever in anything. And you care about most of the characters, even the ones who you're supposed to be a little angrier with. And that's the strength of the series. The performance makes you care to varying degrees out of the stories, if not the survival of all the characters. Thus, when the character rotates on screen for a plot or a subplot, lack of interest in a character does not draw you out of the show. Everything else serves the characters in the series as far as storytelling goes, and all those other parts serve it well. So, final thoughts. Overall, I'd rate this season at least a 9 out of 10, possibly a 10 out of 10. If they land it with a season 2, right? If they land a season 2 that is good as season, then season 1 is a 10 out of 10. Okay? If season 2 doesn't stick the landing, then it's a 9 out of 10. So that's the final point, It's all about the setup. I don't know if the rig is meant as a single season miniseries with a sort of ambiguous apocalyptic ending, or it's meant as the beginning of some sort of series, right? So if it's meant as a single season with that ambiguous apocalypse ending, to me you got a 10 out of 10 there as well, As far as if the beginning of a series, what the final rating, as I mentioned, depends on how well the second season sticks the landing. So we'll see. As for the former, it's a good first season. As the latter, it's a one-time enjoyable examination of how a bunch of characters deal with the apocalypse that's happening around them. Thanks for watching my video. Smash the like button if you liked it. Hit the dislike if you didn't. Comment down below if you have any questions for me or about this video. Please share the video if you found it worthwhile. I'm Matt. This has been UNBEARABLE 73. Have a nice day. I am out of here.